All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We're diving into the world of rental income and taxes today.
Very relevant these days, especially for those, side hustlers out there.
Yeah, building that side hustle, it's a smart move. We've got your research right here, articles from 1-800-ACCOUNTANT, some stuff from Fit for Funds, even an IRS
Well,
publication.
yeah, the official stuff.
And of course, got to have the YouTube perspective. We've got Grant Staven's take on it too.
We got to cover all the bases.
It's a lot to sift through though. So in this deep dive, we're going to break it down. Focus on what's important for you at this stage.
Got to make those profits, but keep the IRS happy too, right?
Exactly. And the thing that jumped out at me was just how much counts as rental income.
Yeah, it's not just the rent checks, right?
Then yeah, the rent's obvious,
Yeah.
but it goes way beyond that.
You were looking at lease cancellation fees, right?
Sure.
Even advance rent.
Those get added in too. And then I found this interesting bit in the 1-800-ACCOUNTANT article about tenant-paid expenses.
Oh, right. If they say call a plumber directly.
Yeah, like if the tenant calls a plumber and pays them directly, it still counts as your income.
For tax purposes, yeah. It might be deductible later, but initially it's income when the tenant pays. And speaking of timing, I know you're looking at that IRS publication.
Oh yeah, that was intense.
They're very clear that it's the date the income is due that matters, not when you actually get it.
So even if a tenant's late, you got to report it for that year.
Gotta report it. Makes sense, but definitely adds a layer of complexity. Speaking of complex, what about security deposits?
Oh yeah, security deposits, they seem to have their own set of rules.
The key is whether you intend to return the deposit. If it's truly refundable, it's not income.
Okay, that makes sense.
But if you keep it for damages or to cover that last month's rent, then it gets added to your taxable income.
So basically it turns into advance rent at that point.
Hmm.
All right, so we've established that rental income can be pretty broad, but how do we actually figure out, like, the tax we'll owe on all this?
Well, the good news, bad news is it's taxed just like your other income, meaning your tax bracket matters.
Makes sense.
That 1-800-ACCOUNTANT article had a rundown of the 2023 brackets, but keep in mind those are federal and just a starting point.
Right, always best to talk to a tax pro, especially if you have multiple properties or things get complicated.
Definitely. But even with professional help, it's good to have a grasp of the basics. So to calculate your rental income tax, you add up all that income, including those weird situations we talked about, and then
Subtract the allowable expenses, right? That's where the deductions come in.
you got it. And what's left is your taxable rental income or even a loss, potentially.
Right, so you could owe nothing.
Potentially. We'll get into those deductible expenses in a bit. But first, you came across this thing about earned versus unearned income. Did you find that a little strange?
I did. It seems like the IRS thinks rental income is unearned, which feels kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
We're actively managing these properties.
It's a head scratcher for sure. But there's some interesting exceptions you found. Like, what if you rent out your personal home for less than 15 days a year?
Oh yeah, that one caught my eye.
Tax-free. Nice little perk.
Definitely. And then there's the whole thing with mixed-use properties.
Ah, yeah. If you're using part of it for yourself, like a home office, you got to be careful to divide those expenses. Personal versus rental, only the rental portion is deductible.
Lots of nuances there.
Oh.
But all right, let's get to the good stuff. Deductions, what can we actually write off to reduce that taxable rental income?
This is where it gets fun. The IRS is pretty generous here. They let you deduct a whole range of expenses, but the key is they got to be ordinary and necessary for the rental property.
Ordinary and necessary. I like that. So like basic repairs and of course that mortgage interest.
Tired of scrolling through endless workout videos and confusing money-making schemes? Fit4funds.com is your one-stop destination for reliable fitness equipment guides and proven side hustle strategies. From foam rollers to freelancing, we break down what actually works. No fluff, just practical tools to build your body and bank account. Visit fit4funds.com today, where fitness meets financial freedom.
Those are definitely on the list. You can also deduct property taxes, insurance premiums, advertising costs to find tenants,
Anything else?
even legal fees, like if you end up having to evict someone.
Whoa, evictions. We haven't even gotten to that yet.
We'll get there. But first, let's talk about that mortgage interest deduction. A lot of people think they can just write off their whole mortgage payment, which isn't true.
Right, it's just the interest part that's deductible, not the principal. And there are rules about which loans qualify too, right?
Absolutely. And while we're on specifics, remember that IRS article about deducting costs for securing tenants?
Oh, yeah.
Good news there. They changed the rules in 2022 to make it more landlord-friendly.
So now you can deduct the cost of finding your first tenants and any subsequent ones.
Yep. Used to be only for subsequent tenants. Big win, especially when you're starting out.
Okay, so we've got a good list of allowable deductions starting to form here. But just to be safe, are there any expenses that are specifically not deductible?
Knowing what not to deduct is just as important. One big one is those loan principal repayments. You borrowed that money, so you can't deduct it.
Right, that makes sense.
Improvements are a tricky one. Things like adding a new bathroom, finishing a basement, those are considered capital expenditures, not operating expenses. They're handled differently.
So fixing a leaky faucet deductible, but installing a fancy new shower system, not so much.
Bingo. Repairs maintain, improvements add value, and another important one, you can only deduct expenses for properties that are actually generating rental income.
So if I'm fixing up a place to rent out later, I can't start deducting those costs right away.
Nope. Gotta wait till it's actually rented and bringing in that income.
Gotcha. Keeping everything separate is key. But man, all this tracking and calculating, it seems a bit much. Is there any way to simplify things, especially for someone starting out?
There is. The IRS actually has a simplified deduction for residential rentals. You can just claim a flat 15% of your gross rent as deemed expenses instead of tracking every little thing.
Oh, wow, that sounds way easier. But there's got to be catch, right?
Well, it might not maximize your deductions. If your actual expenses are higher than 15%, you're leaving money on the table.
So it's worth comparing the two methods, see what works best for my situation.
Definitely. And the simplified method is only for residential properties, not commercial. And if you're renting through a partnership or trust, it's not an option.
Okay, not a universal solution, but definitely something to consider. Now, let's talk about a less fun scenario. What happens if my expenses are actually higher than my rental income in a year?
The dreaded rental loss, it happens, especially early on. You might have higher upfront costs or unexpected repairs.
So if I have a loss, can I use it to offset my other income, like lower my overall tax bill?
Unfortunately, in most cases, no. Rental losses are kind of treated separately. However, you can offset losses against gains from other rental properties.
Oh, interesting. So if I had two properties, one making a profit, the other with a loss, I could use that loss to reduce the overall taxable income from my rentals.
Exactly. Way to soften the blow of those early losses as you grow your portfolio. Speaking of blows, what about those penalties for not reporting rental income correctly? That IRS publication kind of freaked me out.
Right. They seem pretty serious about this stuff.
They do, but at least there's that voluntary disclosure program. If you discover a mistake, you can come forward and correct it without facing the full wrath of the IRS.
Better to be safe than sorry.
Transparency is key. They can get info about your rental income from various sources, like e-stamping records used in some states.
Okay, so no hiding those profits under the mattress. Sounds like being organized, keeping good records, and maybe even talking to a tax pro are the best ways to stay out of trouble.
Absolutely. Now that we've got those basic tax mechanics down, let's switch gears a bit. What about some practical strategies for maximizing that rental income? There were some gems in those sources you gathered.
I'm all ears. Let's get strategic.
Well, remember Graham Stephan in his video, he talked about the 1% rule, simple guideline for setting your rental rates.
Yeah, the 1% rule.
It basically says your monthly rent should be about 1% of the property's market value.
Right, I remember that. Good starting point, but obviously got to adjust for the specific market.
Of course. And that Fit for Funds article brought up some other key factors, location, amenities,
Yeah, location is everything.
and even seasonal variations in demand.
That makes sense. Like a place near a university might get higher rent during the school year.
Exactly. So pricing is more of an art than a science. Got to research, be aware of market dynamics.
It's all about finding that sweet spot. All right, so I've got my price set. Now, how do I find those dream tenants? The ones who pay on time and treat the property well.
The quest for the perfect tenant. That's where good screening comes in. Your research highlights some key strategies, right?
Yeah. Background checks, credit reports, talking to previous landlords.
Those are your tools. A thorough background check can uncover any red flags.
Like a history of evictions or criminal activity. Scary stuff.
Better to know up front. And a credit report gives you insights into their financial stability. How likely are they to pay rent on time?
Makes sense.
And don't underestimate those previous landlord references. They can tell you how the tenant actually behaved, how they treated the property.
Real-world insights. So screening is key. But even with the best screening, things can still go wrong, right?
Yeah.
What if a tenant stops paying rent or violates the lease agreement.
That's when things get tricky. You got to know your rights and responsibilities as a landlord. That IRS publication went into some detail about that, yeah.
Yeah, they did. Things like security deposits, eviction procedures, handling damaged property. It can get complicated.
It can. Your security deposit is your first line of defense.
But there are rules about how you can use it, right?
Right. It's not just a free-for-all fund. You can usually use it for unpaid rent, damages beyond normal wear and tear,
Okay.
specific lease violations, but there are legal guidelines to follow.
And if I actually need to evict someone, there's a whole process for that,
Hmm.
which probably varies depending on where you live.
Absolutely. Know those local laws and procedures. And speaking of avoiding headaches, having a solid lease agreement is crucial.
The lease agreement is like the landlord's Bible. It lays out all the terms, everyone's responsibilities. What happens if things go south?
Exactly. Being clear up front can prevent so many problems. Think of it as your landlord shield.
So spell out those late fees, pet policies, noise restrictions, everything.
Everything. Clarity is key. Now, what about staying organized amidst all this? Did your research mention any tools or strategies?
Yeah. That Fit for Funds article talked about property management software. Seems like those platforms can handle a lot of the heavy lifting.
They can be game changers, especially as you grow your portfolio. They streamline everything from rent collection to maintenance requests, even tenant screening.
No more chasing down rent checks or manually tracking expenses in a spreadsheet.
Exactly. But even if you're managing things yourself, setting up systems is crucial. Tracking deadlines, income, expenses, tenant communication.
Like a dedicated email address for rental stuff, a spreadsheet for finances, a calendar for reminders like lease renewals,
Yeah.
inspections, that kind of thing.
All great ideas. And remember, good record keeping is essential for tax purposes. Those receipts and invoices. Your proof that expenses are legit.
Proof is the pudding, right? Okay, so systems, organization, detailed, records the keys to landlord sanity. But let's circle back to those tax deductions. We touched on them before, but can we break it down further? I want to make sure I'm squeezing every penny out of those deductions.
I like the way you think. The goal is to minimize that taxable income, keep more of your hard-earned profits.
Exactly. Let's start with the big one, mortgage interest. Is it always deductible?
Generally, yes. But there are nuances. That IRS publication was pretty specific about this. The loan has to be specifically for the rental property.
So if I refinance my rental property to, say, pay off some personal debt, that interest wouldn't be deductible.
You got it. The loan's got to be directly tied to the property itself.
Okay, makes sense. What about other common expenses like property taxes and insurance?
Those are definitely deductible. Repairs and maintenance costs, too, as long as they're considered ordinary and necessary for keeping the property in rentable condition.
So like fixing a leaky roof, replacing a broken appliance, those kind of things.
Exactly. But remember, improvements, like adding a new room or fancy upgrades, aren't deductible in the same way. Those are capital expenditures.
So patching a hole in the wall is deductible, but installing a brand new wall is not.
You're catching on. Repairs maintain, improvements add value. And speaking of value, there's this often overlooked deduction called depreciation.
Depreciation, I saw that in the IRS publication, but didn't quite get it.
It lets you recover the cost of the property over its useful life. Basically, even well-maintained properties wear out over time, right?
Right.
Depreciation acknowledges that, and you deduct a portion of the property's cost each year.
So it's not a lump sum deduction, it's spread out over the property's lifespan.
Exactly. And for residential rental properties, the IRS says that lifespan is 27.5 years. So if your property costs, say, $275,000.
You could deduct around $10,000 per year for depreciation.
Potentially, yes. Which highlights why understanding the tax side of this is so important.
Mhm.
There are strategies, deductions that can seriously impact your bottom line.
It's like a whole secret language almost.
Kinda, yeah. But once you know it, it can be very beneficial.
I'm feeling like a real estate mogul in the making. Deductions, depreciation, staying organized, it's all starting to click. But I know we've only scratched the surface here. Where do we go from here?
Now that we've laid the foundation, let's think bigger picture. How does rental income fit into your overall financial goals? It's not just about making a quick buck, right? You're building long-term wealth, maybe even working towards financial freedom.
That's the dream. So how can I use rental income to strategically reach those goals.
One powerful option is using that cash flow to pay down debt, especially your mortgage.
Makes sense. Paying down the mortgage faster, I'm reducing those interest payments, building equity quicker.
And as your equity grows, you have options. You could refinance, tap into that equity for other investments, maybe use it as a down payment on another property.
Like a snowball effect. Rental income helps me pay off debt, which frees up more capital for future investments.
Exactly. And that brings us to another strategic option: reinvesting your rental profits to grow your portfolio.
So instead of pocketing that extra cash, I could use it to buy another rental property. Keep the momentum going.
That's the beauty of compounding. The more properties you own, the more rental income you generate, which can then fuel even more acquisitions.
Wow! Building a passive income stream that could eventually allow me to work less, live more.
It's a compelling strategy, but always be realistic. Don't overextend yourself.
Right. Every property comes with its own expenses, potential challenges.
Exactly. Account for things like vacancy rates, unexpected repairs, potential market fluctuations. But speaking of accounting, did you know you can even use rental income to fund your retirement?
Wait, really? I thought retirement accounts were just for, like, traditional job income.
Nope, there are specific retirement accounts for self-employed folks, small business owners, including those with rental income.
So I could use a portion of my rental profits to contribute to a Roth IRA or a SEP IRA.
You got it. And these accounts offer tax advantages that can seriously boost your retirement savings over time.
This is amazing. Rental income can be a multi-purpose tool for my financial goals. I can use it to pay down debt, buy more properties, fund my retirement.
It's all about understanding the options, having a plan, and being proactive.
My head is spinning. From tenant screening and lease agreements to using rental income for debt payoff, reinvestment, even retirement. Being a landlord is way more than just collecting rent.
It's a journey that requires knowledge, organization, and a proactive approach.
I'm feeling inspired, ready to take my rental income journey to the next level. But I know we've only scratched the surface. Where do we go from here?
We focused on the financial and logistical side, but let's zoom out even further. Remember those mentions of short-term rentals, platforms like Airbnb?
Oh yeah, that's a whole other world.
Yeah.
With its own opportunities and challenges.
Exactly. It's a rapidly growing segment of the rental market. So next, let's dive into the world of short-term rentals. See how it compares to that traditional long-term model we've been discussing.
Sounds good to me. Bring on the Airbnb insights.
Short-term rentals, they're definitely a hot topic these days.
Yeah, for sure. Lots of buzz around them.
And for good reason. I mean, you can see the appeal, a lot more flexibility, potentially higher earnings.
Yeah.
Compared to the traditional long-term rentals.
Yeah, the long-term stuff can feel kind of, set in stone.
Right. But with short-term, you got to consider some different things. I mean, the most obvious difference is the length of stay. But that impacts, like, everything.
Everything.
Yeah, how you manage the property, the pricing, even, like, the legal stuff. It's a whole different ballgame.
It seems like short-term rentals would be a lot more hands-on, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. More frequent turnovers, got to clean between each guest, constant communication.
That's on call, basically.
Pretty much. It's more like running a small hospitality business, almost, than being a traditional landlord.
That's a good way to put it, like a mini hotel.
Yeah. You got to provide those hotel-like amenities, fresh linens, toiletries, and be super responsive to those guest inquiries.
So definitely got to be ready for that level of involvement, customer service.
What about pricing, though? I imagine with short-term rentals, you have more flexibility to adjust prices based on demand, seasonality.
That's one of the biggest advantages. You can dynamically adjust your rates based on time of year, local events.
If there's a big concert in town, you can jack up the prices, right?
Exactly. Supply and demand, baby. And during slower periods, you can offer discounts, promotions, keep those bookings coming.
So you're kind of playing the market, like a stock trader, almost.
Kind of. It's a different kind of market, but yeah, you got to be savvy.
I like it. Sounds like there's real potential to earn more with short-term rentals compared to having a fixed monthly rent.
Definitely. Higher earning potential is there.
Yeah.
But don't forget about the higher expenses.
Oh, right. All that cleaning, the extra amenities, maybe even hiring a property manager if you can't handle it all yourself.
You got to factor all that in when you're assessing profitability. It's not just about those nightly rates. The whole picture. Got it. Okay, so there's a trade-off, basically. More potential income, but also more effort involved. What about the legal and regulatory stuff? I've heard some cities are cracking down on short-term rentals.
That's a huge point. That whole landscape is changing so fast, and it's different everywhere.
So you got to do your homework.
Big time. Before you even think about listing on Airbnb, make sure you're in compliance with all the local laws. Some cities have outright bans.
Whoa.
Yeah. Others have like strict permitting requirements or limits on how many nights you can rent out.
So zoning restrictions, occupancy limits, licensing permits, that's a lot to keep track of.
It is. And don't forget about safety regulations too. Smoke
Okay.
detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, fire extinguishers, all the usual stuff.
Right, safety first. Okay, so lots to consider with short-term rentals. But for someone like me, just starting out, exploring options, how do I even decide between a traditional long-term lease and this whole short-term rental thing?
That's the million-dollar question. No easy answer. It really depends on your situation, your goals, your risk tolerance.
My personality, almost.
Kinda. Weigh the pros and cons. If you're looking for more passive income, don't want the hassle of those frequent turnovers.
Just want that steady rent check coming in.
Then long-term lease might be the way to go. Stable, predictable, less day-to-day management.
But if I'm more hands-on,
Yeah.
like the idea of adjusting prices, willing to put in the extra effort for potentially higher earnings, then maybe short-term rentals are worth a shot.
Exactly. Align your strategy with your personality, your goals.
Okay, so no right or wrong answer. It's about finding the right fit. But regardless of which path I choose, there are some fundamental truths about rental income that apply across the board, right?
For sure. No matter what type of rental you're doing, tenant screening is crucial. Having a rock-solid lease agreement, staying on top of maintenance and repairs.
And on the financial side, tracking income and expenses,
Yeah.
understanding those tax implications, making smart decisions about debt payoff, reinvesting, building long-term wealth.
You got it. Whether you're renting out a spare room or an entire apartment building, those principles hold true.
The fundamentals don't change. This has been so helpful. I'm feeling way more informed about the different rental models. But we've talked a lot about the practical stuff, the financial stuff. What about the emotional side of being a landlord?
Oh, that's an interesting one, often overlooked. Real estate, it's not just about bricks and mortar. It's about people's lives, their homes. There's an emotional element to it for both landlords and tenants.
I can definitely see that. So how do those emotions play out for landlords specifically?
Well, there's the pride of ownership. A lot of landlords feel that. They're providing quality housing, contributing to their community.
Yeah, it's a good feeling to know you're giving someone a nice place to live.
Right. And especially with long-term tenants, you can build a real connection, even friendship sometimes.
It's more than just a business transaction. You're part of each other's lives.
It's a human connection. But let's be real, being a landlord can also be emotionally draining.
Oh, yeah. Especially when you're dealing with difficult tenants, property damage.
Or evictions. That's never fun.
It can be super stressful.
It tests your patience, for sure. So it's important to have healthy ways to cope with those challenges.
Like exercise, spending time in nature, talking to friends.
Exactly. And remembering your why. Why did you get into this in the first place? Focusing on those long-term goals, the positive aspects of being a landlord. It helps get you through those tough times.
Keeping perspective. Don't get bogged down by the negativity.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone. There are tons of resources out there. Online forums, support groups, professional organizations. Don't be afraid to reach out for help or advice.
It's like a whole community of landlords out there going through the same thing.
Exactly. It's a network, a support system. Tap into it.
Okay, so we've covered the financial side, the practical side, even the emotional side of rental income. It's a lot more than just collecting those rent checks.
It's a multifaceted journey, but ultimately it's about knowledge, strategy, and a bit of resilience.
And a sense of humor, probably.
Definitely. But remember, this journey is also about staying informed, being adaptable.
Because the real estate market, it's always changing, right? New technologies, new trends popping up all the time.
Exactly. So make it a habit to stay up to date. Read industry news, maybe go to some workshops or webinars. Connect with other landlords, real estate professionals.
Never stop learning.
Exactly. Learn from others' experiences. It's invaluable.
This has been super helpful. I'm feeling much more informed about all the different aspects of being a landlord. But we've talked a lot about the here and now. What about the future of rental income? How do you see things evolving?
We've touched on the rise of short-term rentals, but beyond that, technology is going to continue to disrupt the real estate industry in ways we can't even imagine yet.
That's both exciting and kind of scary. What kind of technologies are we talking about?
Things like artificial intelligence, blockchain, even virtual reality, they're all going to have a major impact.
Whoa, that sounds futuristic.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me some specific examples? Like, how could those technologies shape the future of rental income?
Absolutely. Let's start with artificial intelligence.
Okay, artificial intelligence. It seems like it's everywhere these days. How could it specifically impact, like, rental income?
Well, AI algorithms can already do a lot. Analyze tons of data. They can spot investment opportunities, even predict rental trends.
Wow, seriously?
Yeah, think about it. They could help you find that perfect property, set the optimal rent price, even pre-screen tenants to minimize your risk.
It's like a super smart real estate assistant.
Pretty much. Working for you 24/7.
That's pretty amazing. But is this, like, actually happening? Or is it more of a future thing?
It's happening now, and it's only going to get bigger. AI is evolving fast.
That's exciting, but also a little, intimidating.
Mm.
What about blockchain technology? I know that's like the crypto thing, but how does that fit into rental income?
Blockchain could change how we do, well, everything in real estate. Buying, selling, even managing properties. Yeah, it creates these super secure records
Yeah.
of ownership. Everything's transparent. Could streamline transactions and even make it easier for regular people to invest through fractional ownership.
Fractional ownership. What's that?
So instead of needing a huge mortgage, you could pool funds with other investors to buy a property, using blockchain to make it all secure and transparent.
That's fascinating. So blockchain's all about simplifying, securing transactions. What about virtual reality? That just seems like so far out there.
Virtual reality is already changing how people view properties. Have you seen those virtual tours where you can walk through a place from your computer?
Yeah, yeah. Those are cool, especially if you're moving to a new city or can't physically visit a place.
Exactly. And it can be used for things like virtual staging. Landlords can show different furniture arrangements, design options, appeal to more tenants.
It's like the possibilities are endless. But as a landlord, how do I keep up with all this? Make sure I'm, on the cutting edge.
Stay curious. Be open to new ideas. Read those industry publications. Go to conferences. Talk to other landlords who are embracing technology.
So don't be afraid to experiment a little
Mm.
with new platforms, tools.
Exactly. But remember, technology is a tool. It's there to help you, not replace you. You still need your human touch, your landlord instincts.
Right. It's about finding that balance. Embrace the new stuff, but don't forget the fundamentals.
You got it. And as you navigate this crazy world of rental income, remember real estate is more than just an investment. It's about creating spaces for people.
Places where people live, work, build their lives.
Exactly. So consider the impact you're having on your tenants, your community, even the environment.
Being a responsible landlord. Wow, this has been an incredible deep dive. We went from like zero to real estate hero. Learned about everything from being a landlord to like the future of the industry.
I'm glad you found it helpful. Remember, knowledge is power, and your journey's just beginning.
I'm definitely feeling inspired. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, guiding me through all this.
Happy to help. Remember, stay curious, stay adaptable, stay informed. There's a lot of opportunity out there.
This has been another fantastic episode of The Deep Dive. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into, well, who knows what. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.